I was diagnosed with cervical cancer, which was terrifying. I did not know at the age of 21, I think I was at the time, that, you know, I could contract a virus that would then lead to cervical cancer. And because of my upbringing, I felt like I really couldn't turn to my family. You know, in situations like that, you often turn to your family for advice or guidance. And I chose to walk that path on my own.
Well, thank you for coming out here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Appreciate it, all the way from Dubai, too. I mean, you're a Hollister local, so.
Home. Hollister's home.
This is home.
So this is nice.
Yes, I'm excited.
Me too. I'm excited too. And thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for you. This is epic, and excited to hear the stories that you're going to tell.
It's going to be fun. Well, I'm excited to have you on the very first episode of Hope to Hustle. And I appreciate it. Everybody, we have Emaan Abbass, and she is from Hollister and currently living in Dubai. How long have you been there?
Yeah, I've been in Dubai for 7 years.
7 years.
Was not the plan.
Yeah. What made you go out there?
So my sister actually moved there first. So she lives there too. And I went to go visit her on vacation, and it was just a completely different world. I mean, you know, coming from Hollister, where it's a little different. Yeah. But yeah, I've always lived in California. Never really thought that I would move overseas, and ended up going there on vacation. Ended up meeting a fellow female entrepreneur that I really admired and wanted to work for her. And that ended up being like my highway to Dubai.
That's awesome. I love that. And what were your goals? Like, what were your career goals when you moved there? And like, what was it that you saw for your future?
Yeah, I think at the time before I left, I was about to turn 30. I knew the world that I wanted to be in. I always was really passionate about cosmetics and the whole makeup, skincare, wellness industry. And before moving there, I worked for Sephora. And while I was working there was a founder of a brand that I really admired. And I wanted a piece of the magic that she was creating in the beauty space. So I don't know if I had any super defined goals of where I thought my life would be 2 years or 5 years after moving there. But I knew I just wanted to be in that space, to work for someone that I admired, to be a part of the beauty world, and to make a difference. I didn't think that that life would become that it has, especially in Dubai.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, you know, and I'm really fascinated with your whole story and everything that you've been through and everything you've gone through to be where you are today, and, you know, all the obstacles that life throws at us, and able to continue going. Right. To me, that's very inspiring. And if you don't mind, I'd love to hear, like, why did you get into that space? What made you so interested and fascinated with, you know, wellness and feminine products and things of that sort?
Right. So just to backtrack for those that are not familiar, I have a feminine and sexual wellness brand. I know you know, it's by the name of Cheree. It's something that I started a few years ago. And I always say that my journey to starting Cheree, or being in the feminine and sexual wellness space, it's not something that I imagine myself doing, but I definitely think that all of the experiences that I've had specifically with my feminine and sexual health is what ultimately led me to being in that space and to creating a brand and to really being involved in some of the changes that are happening, not just here in the States, but in the Middle East specifically. So I'll start from the beginning. Grew up in Hollister, little teeny tiny country town. I am the daughter of Egyptian immigrants. So I grew up in a pretty strict Muslim household where the topic of, you know, sex and our bodies and intimacy, pleasure, but also just the things about the female body, like periods and how to care and to understand how your body evolves, they're definitely not topics that we covered in my household. And so growing up, a lot of what I learned was in school. And, you know, we didn't really learn much. A lot of it was very much fear-based and abstinence-based and all of the worst possible things that could happen to you if you are sexually active or if you go down that road. And so years later in college was one of the first times that I took my own feminine health into my own hands. I decided to go to the clinic and get my very first pap smear. And it was a result of my very first gynecological exam that I was diagnosed with cervical cancer, which was terrifying. I did not know at the age of 21, I think I was at the time, that, you know, I could contract a virus that would then lead to cervical cancer. And because of my upbringing, I felt like I really couldn't turn to my family. You know, in situations like that, you often turn to your family for advice or guidance, and I chose to walk that path on my own. So treatment and...
So you got diagnosed and you didn't tell anybody?
No.
Wow.
I told a couple of friends that I was dealing with something with my feminine health. I told a couple of friends about, you know, having to get biopsies and stuff, but I think I held so much shame around the fact that, and I'm a bit more educated and more mature, and I have a deeper understanding of, you know, what happened to me in my body, but I carried a lot of blame and shame, and it's a lot of the reason why I didn't share with a lot of the people around me.
Do you feel like your parents knew something was going on, or not at all? Did you want to go to them and talk to them about it, or was the shame making you hold back completely where you just wanted to hide it even more?
Yeah, I don't think they knew. I'm really, it's a blessing and a curse. I'm really good at compartmentalizing. I like to put all the hard stuff into a box and deal with the hard stuff on my own. I probably had really poor coping mechanisms in terms of like how I was dealing with it on my own, but I don't think my parents could tell or see any difference because I just kind of like put it in a box. I dealt with it when I dealt with it and then put it back in the box when I didn't have to.
And that's hard. I mean, at that age, you're still so young, you know, and that's a young age to go through something that's so scary and could be life-threatening. And to deal and cope with that on your own, I could only imagine. What treatment, what did you have to do to get through that?
Yeah, so I was really lucky, very fortunate in which they were able to detect mine early enough to where I did not have to go through chemo, which is a treatment that some women have to go through. I had 2 rounds of cryosurgery. So once when I was diagnosed at 21 and then again at 24. But it's something that I had to continue to monitor and track throughout my 20s. So every 3 to 6 months, at the very beginning, every 3 to 6 months, I would have to get scans and biopsies, and they would just track the progress of the cancer and making sure that everything that was taken out during cryosurgery was not spreading. It wasn't until I was 30 that I got my very first pap smear with like 0 detection of cancerous cells. So it was like a 9-year long process.
And did your parents not know about this the entire 9 years?
No.
Do they know about it now?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
So because of what I went through and the experience that I had, you know, carrying that shame, carrying that guilt, being very uneducated, it made me really aware of what was going on with my feminine health and my body. And eventually it led me to want to create a brand with products that were super safe, super effective, and really focused on feminine and intimate health. I also really wanted to focus on education and starting the conversation and really educating women on their bodies and a lot of the things that, unfortunately, cultural shame and stigma get in the way of women learning and understanding. And so because I was launching this brand, and I knew that if I was going to ask women to trust me and to come into my sphere and to trust the brand and trust the products that I was creating, I was going to have to be very open and honest about why I was creating that brand and what I had been through in order for them to have that trust. And so I knew that I was going to have to tell my family first.
Wow.
I didn't want them to find out.
Right. Through somebody else or through, online.
Right. So it was like 2 months or 3 months before I launched. It was during the pandemic, so it was on Zoom, which was not the way that I wanted to tell them. But that was the first time I shared with them, and that was a couple of years ago. So
how did they take it?
It was hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. I do remember I tried to tell my mom once a few years back. And I think I don't know if there was just like a misunderstanding or it just didn't sink in or she strategically, not strategic amnesia, but like blocked it out almost, that her daughter had gone through something so heavy without her knowing.
Right.
But when we spoke about it before launching the brand, it was, I think, really devastating for them. It's something that I've also had to learn how to let go of the guilt. Like I feel like I robbed my parents of an opportunity for them to support me through something.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. I think a lot of women and men, but I think specifically in the Middle Eastern culture, in the Muslim culture, a lot of us, we be living double lives.
Right.
Like we have a lot going on
Yeah.
that we don't tell our families. And I think the best or the greatest thing that came out of that conversation was seeing that they loved me. They were supporting me, that they wish they could have been there for me.
Right.
And that
I'm sure a level of understanding a little bit because of how you feel, just of, how you were raised. I mean, they obviously feel the same way because they were raised and had kind of passed that down to you.
Right.
So maybe a level of understanding, but yeah, I mean, I can imagine that would be so hard. Do you look back and wish after telling them that you would have told them when you were going through the process?
I do. I think what sucks is that there's often so many fears that get in the way, and we often make so many assumptions on how people might react or think or feel. And I made the assumption that I could potentially lose my family, or that they could turn their backs on me, or that they wouldn't support me. And I think at the time, because everything that I was going through was so heavy already, I didn't want to bear the weight of potentially losing my family too. But after I told them, just to hear their support and their acceptance and their encouragement of me now taking my struggles and creating a space where other women could come and confide in me, I think they were really proud.
Yeah.
And it made me sad that I hadn't told them before, but happy that we were able to heal through that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's a lot. That's heavy. That's deep to have to deal with something so big. I could only imagine, but that shows your strength as well, is how I look at it. I mean, I could imagine wishing, I'm a big mama's girl. Like I need her for every little thing. I call if there's a squirrel on the fence,
Right.
So it's, to hear that culture and upbringings and everything is so different that, that everybody looks at things like that's a hardship that that would be the first person to be texting, like, I need you like right now. So, that to do that alone, like that's a lot of strength for you as a woman, and to turn that into, a positive of what you can do for other women that might be going through similar things, or a preventative of what they can do for themselves to be aware and take care of their bodies. And I feel That's a topic that a lot of people kind of want to turn away. It's like uncomfortable, you know, and letting them know to kind of embrace it, educate yourself, learn about it, because our bodies are our bodies. I mean, this is our sanctuary. You know, we need to be taking care of it. And we aren't taught that by many people of how to do that. So I love that you've created a space for those girls and women of all different ages to get in tune with their bodies and what they need to do. So tell me a little bit about that. I love it. That's amazing.
Yeah, I think so. Going from living here in the States, where we are a bit more liberal, open, you know, you can go online or on Instagram and follow accounts, and it's a pretty more open conversation about our bodies, or specifically feminine and sexual health. I found that when I got to the Middle East, no one was talking about it. There wasn't even a ton of products that were available at the time. Like, you could hardly get organic tampons. Like, even to this day, it is difficult to find organic tampons there, and it's 2023. Yeah. I moved in I moved in 2016. Yeah. And so I think seeing that there was that gap in that space, I also spoke to so many women. When I decided to start the brand, I spent a lot of time speaking to other women from around the Middle East, different countries like Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and just wanted to get a better understanding of, like, if I were to launch this brand, what are the topics that you want to hear about? What are the things that you feel are still need to be demystified, or what are some of the challenges that you face as a woman with getting, you know, proper health care or proper products that you can trust? And a lot of them said the same thing, that even in school, there was a young girl from Kuwait. She said that in school, during her biology courses, everything about human anatomy, sex, sexuality, even just like basic things like menstruation, menopause, they never learned about. Wow. And that their books were actually like blacked out.
Wow.
Their textbooks were actually blacked out. And so I think hearing that, I wanted to create a space that was safe, inviting, and that we talked about the topics that women really wanted to learn about. I mean, even when you think about when we were in school, good old San Benito, we learned about like STDs, pregnancy, and some of the worst case scenarios of things that could happen to you throughout your feminine health journey. But we didn't talk about infertility or hormone imbalance, IVF or menopause, and how those different phases of life or different things affect your bodies. And so I really wanted to create a space that talked about all of the topics, did not shy away from it, and also created a safe haven for women to come and ask questions. In the Middle East specifically, there are a lot of societal and cultural stigmas that kind of get in the way of women even being able to go see a gynecologist. A lot of women think that they have to be married in order to be sexually active, and that in order to go see a gynecologist, they need to be married. And they need to remove this this idea of that a gynecologist and your feminine health doesn't just have to do with sex. Right. It's like a part of your body.
And what's the average age that they would start seeing a gynecologist?
Really depends, like after their wedding.
Wow.
Which a lot of them are sexually active, or things are happening with their bodies like hormone imbalance, or they're having cysts and they don't even know, and they can't even go to the doctor to get the care that they need because of those cultural stigmas that are in place. And so just really pushing that narrative and pushing those topics around feminine sexual health that a lot of these women have very little exposure to.
Do you feel creating your brand has really changed that stigma a little bit there? Do you feel you were covering, a large range of individuals and girls? Like, how was the feedback that you were getting? Were you getting a lot of people saying, hey, I want to learn more, but maybe I'm ashamed, or I feel like I can't really ask about this? Did you get a lot of that? Or
yeah, I think so. one thing that I was a bit fearful of, or I won't say I'm not really scared of a lot, but something that I had to really think about is the fact that specifically in the UAE, which is where I live, but Middle East in general, these topics are not really spoken about. And it's actually, there's some points that could be, you really straddle the line of like what is legal and what is not legal. And so there were a lot of things that we had to think about in terms of how can we have these conversations, tackle these topics, but do it in a way that is respectful of the culture, respectful of the laws, but still addressing the important topics. And I really tried to come from an angle of, supportive, encouraging, never like lewd or crude. It was always coming from an educational perspective versus, really in your face, abrasive. And I think because we did it that way, it was super well received, where I think a lot of women felt comfortable engaging with us as a brand. We did have some points of friction, I would say, or people that were not excited about it. And I think with every interaction like that, it gave me, although it was frustrating, I understood where it was coming from. And it gave me an opportunity to have a conversation and to learn from, that specific woman or that specific organization that didn't really necessarily agree with what we were doing. For instance, there was a time that I sent out like an influencer pack, and one of the women who received it, she was a local woman, so Emirati, and she just wasn't excited about what we were doing. And she took the opportunity to kind of tear us down and to talk about the things that she didn't agree with, the way that our photos were, or one of our first products was a wipe, and it looks like a condom, but because it was in a nice little gold wrapper. But yeah, she just was not a fan. And I remember watching her stories, and at first it was really positive. And then I started to click through and I was like, oh no, we've gotten off course. And I actually took the opportunity to message her, to reach out to her, to ask for a conversation. We ended up spending 45 minutes on the phone. Oh, wow. And something she told me was, as a Muslim woman, a veiled woman, I don't feel like I see myself in your brand. Like when I look at the photos or the branding or this or that, I don't feel like I see myself. I see what you're doing now. I appreciate the conversation. I actually will use these products, but there's something about, your messaging or your imagery that I don't necessarily agree with. And I think hearing that sucked, but also gave me an opportunity to learn from her, because I wanted to create a space where all women could see themselves. Right. And so how could I make those changes or adjustments without changing the core of the brand and who I was? And so I think
what's hard too is because there's always going to be opinions. Right. You may like white and the other person likes yellow. Right. It's just when you're creating something that to you it stands out and what you like, you're going to get so many different opinions. But I love that you're open-minded about what other, constructive criticism, right? What works for some, what doesn't work for others, and how you can kind of balance it out to where it can be beneficial to both parties. And that's just crazy. Your whole story is just so inspiring to me. You take something that could really turn someone this way, and you turn it this way. And have you done business before? Is this your first business that you decided to create from your experience?
Yeah, no, it's the first time. I've always worked for other people. I've always let my passions kind of guide me, but this is the first time that I took like my own passion and what I now know is my purpose and fueled it into a business. And I've learned so much from launching Kedish that now I also work with other brands, other founders in helping them create products and brands out of, what they think their purpose is.
That's amazing. And what I know from having multiple businesses is there's a lot of trial and error.
Yep.
There's a lot of wins. There's a lot of patience. There's a lot of tears, frustration, wanting to give up, wanting to push harder. If you don't mind just sharing a little bit about your experiences going through the business world, because it's not an easy venture. And I really wanted this to be a comfortable space for people to talk about the hardship that comes along with opening a business, not to be discouraging by any means, but to inspire and encourage people to continue going with their goals and their dreams, because I think a lot of people who maybe have not started a company look at somebody else that's successful and thinks, wow, look at everything that they have, looks easy. Mm-hmm. And the reality of it is it's not. It's actually really, really hard.
Right.
And I want to be able to share that side of business to encourage, women, men, young, older, to know that this is all part of the process. And these are the hoops and ladders that you have to go through to be successful. It's not just going to be handed to you, just like, if you graduate school, if it's handed to you, you're not going to hold that certificate up high as if you worked day in and day out and studied long nights to get that diploma,
right.
Right. So I'm just curious if you went through any struggles or anything that got discouraging to where you wanted to just quit and give up, and did you use those things to push harder and learn from them?
Right. Whew. That's a good question.
That's a lot of questions in one.
That's a big topic. I think starting your own business is probably the hardest thing you could ever do. I've been through some hard stuff in my life, obviously. And I think starting my own business is probably the hardest, which is why I love having this conversation or conversations like this, is because often when you look at like an entrepreneur that you admire, business owner that you admire, you only see, when they're the most successful or when they're at the height, and you don't really always hear about the trials and tribulations that they went through to get there. And so I love that you're creating a space where we could talk about those things. I think for me, initially one of the hardest things was starting. Getting out of my own way. There was so much fear that existed, especially because I was tackling something that was so taboo and so personal to me. And it's something that I really had to work through. Like I had a lot of therapy. I think I would have, I would not have survived the first 2 years of my business if I was not in therapy. That was hard on its own. I also had my own set of challenges in working with people. I had investors at the time, and what's crazy about business, especially if you're getting into business with partners, is you got to pick them. You got to pick them. You got to pick them right. And not even necessarily, good person, bad person. It's more so, do our goals align?
Right.
Do we have the same motivations? And I think whenever you're starting a purpose-driven brand or a purpose-driven company, where that could be different for each person, right, what that motivation is. And that's something that I really struggled with, specifically with Kedish. Unfortunately, I had partners, and we didn't see eye to eye on those motivations. And it ultimately led to us having to pause what we were doing with Kedish. And that was devastating for me. It was really devastating. This is actually the first time I've talked about this. So not a lot of people know. I felt like my world had crashed around me, and it's taken me some time to kind of pause and redirect and kind of see now where I see the brand going. But it's also allowed me to pause and kind of shift and start working with other founders that are similar to me, that have a dream or a mission or know their purpose and want to funnel that into creating a company or a brand. So for instance, I started working with another sexual wellness brand. They're based in the Middle East by the name of Maj. They're incredible, similar mission and similar focus. They focus a lot on Arabic speaking education, but it's been so incredible working with that team because I still get to continue this mission of creating waves in the feminine sexual wellness industry. I continue to work with this community of women that so desperately want to learn about their bodies. And for me, that's been so refreshing and has allowed me to heal from some of the hard stuff that has been happening behind the scenes with my own brand.
I think what's hard too, and I can attest to this also, starting my business very young and in a very new space. I'm very familiar with the substance abuse and mental health field because, of my own journey in recovery. But I was very, very new to business. So I leaned on people that were, more experienced, educated, been in the field, own companies. And it's really hard. I think the hardest thing, and let me know if you feel the same way, but when you're really passionate about starting something, especially that's going to help other people through your own struggles and journey that you went through, you have a lot of trust. And I feel today I'm still learning to be careful with that. I have a heart that will just give, and so I know that other people can come to me and trust me with anything. I will not screw them over. So for me, I trust in people that they're going to guide me and they're going to provide me the resources and the answers that I need to be successful. And when somebody robs you of that, that's really hard. And in my business, I have encountered that more than once, unfortunately. And I'd like to say it's not going to happen again, that it's happened enough to me. But unfortunately, with business, I'm sure I'll have many more encounters of that. And that's really hard to cope with. I feel like that in itself is easy to say, throw the flag, I don't want to do this anymore, because it hurts your heart. It's not something you would do to somebody else. So it really hurts. And when it puts you into tears, it's like, okay, maybe this is not for me.
Yeah.
But if anything, for me, it's pushed me to push harder and take it as a lesson. I mean,
Right.
all those hardships have been the biggest lessons in my career through business. And tell me how you feel. I mean, do you feel, I know it's kind of fresh for you of everything that you're going through, but you are a beautiful person. And
Thank you.
definitely more to come. I've had the absolute privilege of getting to know you more and working aside you, and everything that you do for people is you have a huge heart. And I love that. And it could have knocked you down, but you keep going. I'm curious to know what advice you'd have for somebody else that is young and goal-driven, who wants to start a company, who needs to prepare for those things to happen.
Right.
What advice would you have for them?
Yeah. I think being in business, period, is hard. Being a woman in business is a lot harder.
Yes.
It's just facts. And yes, I've been through similar situations as you where I trust. And I don't want to say I was naive, but yeah, maybe I was naive. And I think through this experience, I learned a lot about my self-worth and what I bring to the table. And although I've had some shaky points where that could have been shattered, I learned through, losing it all or losing the opportunities that I had, that in the future, with any situation, with any business venture, friendship, relationship, doesn't matter. I need to know and trust in what it is that I bring to the table, and I need to honor that every step of the way. So I would say for anyone that is starting a business, know your purpose, know at the core why you're starting that business, are you unshakable in that? And really root yourself in that purpose, because that's what's going to guide you through any shady situation or any situation that tries to bring you off that alignment. I would also say, know your worth and what you bring to the table, and make sure that you get that in writing.
Yes.
You have all the contracts, you double check. Every T is crossed, every I is dotted, and don't shortchange yourself.
No matter how excited you get.
No matter how excited.
Yes.
No matter how little experience you think you have, don't doubt all of those unspoken things that you bring to the table. If you are ready to jump in feet first, you have to know that you have the experience and you have the know-how, you have the knowledge, and that is of value. And you have to make sure that you carry that value in everything that you do, but that other people that are in business with you respect that and will give you that in a form of safety, security, contracts.
Yeah, contracts, more contracts.
Yeah.
And it's always good to have attorneys look over whatever it is that you're signing. And that's something I honestly didn't even learn about until recent years. I never had an attorney really look over anything.
I would say this too, like never be afraid to walk away from an opportunity
Absolutely.
if it doesn't feel right.
Agreed.
What is meant for you will never pass you by. If something doesn't feel right, if something knocks you off of that alignment, don't be afraid to turn around, walk away, because something else that is bigger and better will be behind the next door, and it's going to feel horrible. But if you know your worth and you know what you bring to the table, you won't be scared of saying no to anyone.
And I feel like that's a big one. And very hard to do because you get so excited,
right?
You know, when you're first starting something, doesn't feel fully right. And my gut's not loving this, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a try because maybe I don't know, you know, and that's, being burned in the past in my business with that trust, you know, like I said, was really hard because it's like, well, maybe I don't know everything. And I've always told myself too, is be open-minded in constructive criticism. Right. And so the one time that I told myself, okay, bring somebody in that may know more than you and can give you advice and make some corrections and maybe mold your company a little bit better than you have it. It was completely just swept under my feet, and my company almost completely crumbled because of it. And it's like, okay, rewind, never mind.
Right.
I do know what I'm talking about. And I love what you said with, if you are rooted and your core is what you believe in, you will go in the right direction with trial and error, of course. I mean, we're going to continue that. And that's one thing that I tell myself often, as well as my advice to other women, is stay in your lane. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't even say that enough, just because I get so many phone calls of people who know nothing about the mental health space, and they see an investment opportunity. And to me, that is very frustrating because that is not in alignment of why I do what I do. I feel I am successful in what I do because I love what I do.
Right.
And I don't look at a car dealership and say, well, the owner's driving a really nice car, I'm going to go open up a dealership,
right.
You know? And if you stick with what you love and what you're passionate about, it will work out. Mm-hmm. It will continue to work out and to grow. And sometimes we have to get off the path a little bit to get where we want. Yeah, totally. So I love that advice to other people wanting to start businesses. And what's your biggest lesson that you feel that you've learned, whether it be in business or personally, through everything?
Man, I think it's just what I just said, that knowing my value and knowing that is worth so much. And I think in the past there have been situations, and this is both personal, business, like relationships, with men, with family, with friends, but also in business specifically. I've really had to take what I know about myself. I know that I'm hardworking. I know that I'm honest, that what I do, I always pour 110% into, and I really lead with my heart, and that I bring a lot of value to the table. And in any situation, if my values are not being aligned with, or if my boundaries are not being respected, then I need to feel confident in myself and trust in myself to walk away from those situations or those relationships or those people. I think whenever you're doing something, again, like you said, from the purity of your heart, where the intention is to serve other people and to give to other people, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a long road. It's not always the most lucrative of businesses, but if you keep going and you keep doing and you keep earning the trust of those around you, your community, or the women, in my case, the women in the feminine and sexual health space that want to be a part of these brands and want to learn more about themselves, then you will be successful. And I think it really is having that trust in yourself and allowing that to be the guide through any of the tough stuff that happened, because it is tough out there.
It is hard. And what about with health? Same thing. I mean, now looking back, regardless of your upbringing and the fears, and maybe therapy has helped you with that as well now, of, you had said putting everything, the fear, in a box and dealing with it. And then, do you still do that now? Or are you trying to change your ways in that a little bit?
Yeah, I think I'm still the queen of compartmentalizing, but I'm getting better at opening the box and opening the box in a healthy way. Mm-hmm. I would say specifically for feminine, when it comes to feminine health, I would encourage all women, regardless of your age, at the time. And this could even be important for, mothers who have young girls. Know that your feminine health is a part of your overall health. So just like you would go see a podiatrist or an optometrist for your eyes, podiatrist for your feet, you have to go see a gynecologist when it comes to your feminine health. And you can go as early as when, your daughter or a young girl starts menstruating. That should be the age that you start visiting a gynecologist, and not even necessarily to get a pelvic exam, but even just to learn, to know, are my cycles regular? Is what I'm feeling normal? And it could be such a special relationship that a young girl can start to have with her body through learning the right way and through learning from from an educational space. And it could then empower her to make the best decisions, throughout her life, whether it be in her sexual interactions or in her overall feminine health. How she cares for her body could help her make the right decisions for herself. And so I would say, go see a gynecologist once a year, get your pelvic exam. It's so important. It's life-saving. And I think for me specifically, becoming more in tune with my body has then allowed me to really value and care for my body through whatever it is that I do, whether it's prioritizing my physical health, going to the gym, eating the right foods, or my mental health with therapy and getting the support that I need through the tough stuff.
I think, I love that advice for especially mothers, to take your daughter to see a gynecologist and having that conversation, that it's not about, intercourse and having sex. Because I'll never forget, I think I was 16, and the way I got my gynecologist appointment was I walked into my room and there was a pamphlet on birth control, sex, with an appointment card to see one. And I was scared. I was crying. I was like, why do I need to do this? Let alone it was a man, and I was not sexually active at the time. So, bless my mom's heart, she thought at the time that I was, and nobody comes with a manual of how you should have that conversation, but you have professionals in a field and people who've had that experience, such as yourself, who can give us that advice of that it's really taking care of your body and explaining that to your child, that it's like going to the doctor for a checkup. It's no different. Maybe it's a little uncomfortable, but it has nothing to do with being sexually active, because you almost feel when your parent brings that up, they're almost accusing you, even though they're not,
Right.
that you're doing something maybe that you aren't.
Right.
And so that's really important. I love that. And I have a daughter. She's very young still, but I will definitely be keeping that in mind when she's older, because that's scary. I mean, you were so young when you were diagnosed that I'm sure you didn't expect it. I'm sure most people, listening or, have children don't expect their child to go through that.
Right, right. Yeah, I think it's just creating that safe space where, there's this openness where they can ask questions and feel like they could turn to someone. And if you don't feel comfortable being that person as like a parent or an older sister or an auntie, there are a ton of other experts and, organizations and communities that are out there that could be that point of support. So feel free to DM me if you don't feel like being or feel comfortable being that person. But I think giving women an outlet where they can feel safe in learning and getting a deeper understanding it's so important.
Absolutely. Well, Emaan, thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining me today. This is a beautiful conversation, and I hope that we are inspiring other women, young girls, to be able to take this journey with pride and education and comfort and feel safe. And Emaan, if they do have questions for you, want to DM you, how do they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, pretty active on Instagram, at they call me Emaan, or at they call me _Emaan. So feel free to reach out and follow along. Working on some cool stuff with other cool brands, but also the reboot, Little Keddish 2.0 coming soon.
I love that. Yes. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.